Yeah, so I'm going to get a little nerdy today. It's just what I am when it comes to football. I love this game, and I really love the intricacies and how deep you can get into it. So there are some dates that you need to know about when it comes to the NFL. All right, so from February 17th to March 3rd, which is next week, this is when teams can actually designate the franchise tag or the transition tag to current players that they have that are free agents. So remember, with the franchise tag, it's a one-year deal. Somebody's typically paid the average of the top five people at that position, or 120% of their salary from the previous year. And then the transition tag is usually the top 10 players in terms of their average salary. So most teams don't use the transition tag. It happens sometimes. And only two teams last year, I think it was the Bengals and the Chiefs, used the franchise tag. So it's not something that you have to use every year, but it's important to try to make sure that you're cap friendly. And that's the irony about the franchise tag. It's because it really hits your cap immediately because it is a guaranteed one-year deal, and teams often use it multiple years based on the players that they want to keep but don't want to sign to a long-term deal for whatever reason. All right, March 9th, legal tampering. This is when you could actually, quote-unquote, go and talk to these players along with their agents who are not on your team. They're going to be unrestricted free agents. Because if you do it before March 9th, it's considered illegal. You can lose draft picks and all that type of stuff. And then the 11th is when the new league year starts, and that's when free agency really hits and trades can happen. So that's kind of where we are. I want to give you that background because I want to talk about three specific opportunities and players that I think are going to be huge this year. And I want to start with A.J. Brown. And here's the thing I want to talk about. I think this is a misconception. It's not that A.J. Brown isn't good for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not that there's not a valid conversation whether or not the Eagles should try to keep A.J. Brown or try to trade him. If you ask me for my money, I don't think you let good opportunities walk out the door at his age and when he's at his apex of his ability in the NFL. I think that's how good A.J. Brown is in the run game and in the passing game. But here's the thing with the Eagles for me. I think you're burying the lead anytime you talk about A.J. Brown. I think you're not discussing the true issues that may lay at the feet of Howie Roseman, the GM, and the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's re-signing a bunch of this young defensive talent. Remember, they were able to do what the San Francisco 49ers couldn't do in the past 5 to 7 years, and that's not only not win the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, but that's not pay off a roster full of talent before they had to lose a bunch of that talent through free agency and trade them away, which is why I was so shocked that the 49ers made it to the division round of the playoffs last year, because I thought they were done. I didn't think they were a championship contender, and they proved not to be to a certain extent, but they got further than I think they did. The Eagles took advantage of that. But you got guys like Nakobe Dean, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. These guys that were drafted in 2023 or so are coming up for extensions, and this is what this team is built on: young, defensive powerhouses and thoroughbreds. So if you're Howie Roseman and you're this organization, you got to look at A.J. Brown and say, listen, I think we need to keep him. He's making $30 million a year. Now, if you want to put A.J. Brown in that conversation of top-tier receivers that won a Super Bowl, I can't deny that. But I'll also say that Philadelphia is a team that definitely considered themselves a run-first team, but he's still valuable. So if you can re-sign those guys and determine who you want, because defense is going to be what Philly needs to be. It's where their bread is buttered. As good as they've been offensively, we've seen them struggle. They've been elite defensively the past 2 or 3 seasons because they've been very good on the defensive side of the football while being young. So to me, that's the biggest question in free agency. So while everybody wants to focus on A.J. Brown, your boy's going to focus on those young defensive studs that they got that started immediately coming out of college, who were ready, who were poised, and who were athletic and sound enough to help this team win a Super Bowl. Because if Philly wants to get back to that standard, that's what needs to be taken care of in my estimation. The next player I want to talk about is Trent Williams. Trent Williams is a first-ballot Hall of Famer as soon as he leaves the NFL 5 years after. No doubt. And he's been so good with San Francisco, I think a lot of people forget that he started his career in Washington. But here's the thing. He's 38 years old. I'm not going to say he's missed a whole bunch of time due to injury, because he hasn't. He's missed some spot times the past 2 or 3 years. But here's the thing. He held out last year. And with this contract, that's not very cap friendly. It's about $40 million against the cap in 2026. Who says if they don't come to an agreement on this deal, he won't hold out again? I firmly believe that I've seen teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers at quarterback. I've seen other teams who have held on to assets way too long. And if you say Trent Williams is still a tradable commodity, can get you value, I think that's an opportunity, because it's not just about him being a great player. He is a great player. I just told you he's phenomenal. All-pro almost every year. But is he worth the salary cap hit that he's going to force on you, and does it limit you from developing in other areas? Because remember, you just gave Brock Purdy the bag a year and a half ago. Where does this leave San Francisco? Trent Williams is phenomenal. If you're San Francisco, this is going to be a very tough decision. John Lynch, the GM, has talked about he's trying to restructure the deal, but we've seen Trent, like I said, already hold out. What does this mean moving forward? Are you going to have the opportunity to pay him and keep him happy, and will he be healthy at 38 years old with heavier knees, with older knees, against guys on the defensive side of football that are very young and very athletic? I think this is a big opportunity for San Francisco either way. But if you ask me, I'm always erring on the side of letting somebody go too early than holding on to them too late, because you strap yourself financially, plus you put yourself in a position where you may have a diminishing return on the ability of a player, even though he's been so phenomenal for over a decade. Last guy I want to talk about is Alec Pierce. And I'm going to put Alec Pierce in the category that I put every other Indianapolis Colt in, whether it's Josh Downs, with Jonathan Taylor, not so much, but whether it's guys like Zaire Franklin, I just think this whole organization is undervalued. So if I were to ask you who led the league in yards per reception last year, which means who was the biggest deep threat by metrics and by numbers, it's not Jamar Chase, right? It wasn't T. Higgins. It wasn't Justin Jefferson. It wasn't Jackson Smith and Jigma who burst onto the field. It wasn't Emeka Ibuka. It was Alec Pierce. And I think a lot of that was predicated on the Indianapolis Colts' ability to run the football. So the question is, he's going to be huge in free agency. The Titans are probably looking at him. The Bills should be looking at him. A lot of teams are going to be looking at Alec Pierce because of his size, because of his speed, and because of his ability of getting better and running the route tree. Now, what does that mean for Indianapolis? Because I think if they believe in Alec Pierce, it's because they believe in Daniel Jones. And both guys are free agents. And you know what? I really wish that Daniel Jones didn't get hurt, because the Colts could have actually been able to assess the entire situation a little bit more accurately. But I think they understand what they have in Daniel Jones. They don't need him to be an all-pro. They just don't need him to be a bust. Don't turn the ball over consistently. Don't put us in bad positions. Don't put the Colts organization in position to where they're looking for a quarterback next year, because they have you in your opportunity to redeem yourself in your career, because you were a top 10 pick when you came out of college, out of Duke. Here's where Alec Pierce is intriguing to me as well. Receivers, I just told you, I don't believe necessarily in paying top-tier money, $30, $40 million for receivers, if you have the cap space to get better otherwise. See, Philadelphia and A.J. Brown, they were able to pay him $30 million, but they still were able to pay all these other guys to help them and draft great defensively. So if you don't have that same blueprint, you might not be in that same situation. I know Indy wants Alec Pierce, and I know a lot of other teams want Alec Pierce. Interested to see what happens here, because he is a top-tier free agent, but I truly believe he's underrated, like a lot of other players on this Indianapolis team, because they've been, I think, average for so long, and in the market where they reside, people don't pay attention to them, but they are a powder keg in my estimation. They have an opportunity to be a team that didn't make the playoffs, but can be a playoff team consistently the next 4 or 5 years, and they've kept Shane Steichen. That means that the GM and the ownership with Ballard and the Irsay believe in him, and they want to see this through. And I can't knock a team who's trying to trust the process that they created in the first place.